whoever is our Prime Minister, both of the remaining candidates were there in Cabinet doing it. So they can't disown what's happened, they can't disown their policies, they have to accept that they are responsible for the mess that the country is now in. Barry Gardiner, I'm the Member of Parliament for Brent North. Happy Diwali to you.
Thank you. And to you. What's going on today?
Well, that's not for me to participate in, but certainly for me to worry about.
And what would be the worst outcome for you today?
Look, I think the worst outcome is the uncertainty of it all. And we're probably going to get a coronation. But if it goes on for another week, it's another week when the country is wondering what its future is and how they're going to pay the bills. So that's the real concern. It's who will be the new Prime Minister is really not the issue. It's what is the country going to be able to do this winter to make sure they can heat their homes, pay their mortgage and put food on the table.
We've had quite a lot of stagnation time, you could say. We had 2 months over the summer in which we were doing hustings. Now we've got another week now of uncertainty.
But doesn't that show you something? Doesn't it show you that actually the 2 months of the previous election was actually more about making sure that they could dominate the airwaves and keep the Conservative brand in front of the public for as long as possible? The fact is they have been able to curtail this process. Previously they said that wasn't possible, but they can do it. They didn't want to do it, and actually they paid the price in the end for not doing it.
I mean, arguably they didn't exactly get the best press on the airwaves over the summer.
Well, look, all press is good press. You know, there's no such thing as bad press. It's how you use that and then how you project your policies, your views over to the public. If you fail to do that, then that's your fault, not the press's.
Can you tell me a little bit about your constituents and how they're reacting to the leadership contest?
I have never had as many emails coming in each day. We now have over 1,000 emails coming in each day. Yesterday it was way more than that. And these are people who are concerned for their future, people who are worried about how they are going to cope, not just in the short term, but actually in the long term. They've seen what's happening with their mortgages. Many of them have had to renew their mortgage at a terrible time in terms of the interest rates and the difference they're now paying. They can't afford it. They're deeply worried. They're worried about their children. They're worried about their future. So from the point of view of my constituents, there is real mental anguish. And we need to see the mental health care for them that simply isn't in place.
Have you seen a rise in food banks or warm banks in your area?
Yes, we've always unfortunately had to rely on food banks for many years now in Brent North. But of course the number of people who are going to be using that is increasing. And I was in touch with the chief executive of my local authority just the other day saying, look, how are we going to make special provision to feed people during the winter? Because there will be people who, we know already 4 million people are going without food. So we know in Brent North that we're going to be facing a very, very challenging time.
How do you explain the concept of more political stagnation to someone who's going hungry?
Well, look, my job is not to explain it to them. My job really is to try and make sure that we can avoid them going hungry, to make sure that we can help them with the debt that they face, that we make sure that we're coping with their housing problems, and that I'm working as closely with the local council on those issues as I possibly can. Because this is not a time for pontificating, it's not a time for, great statements. It's a time for rolling up your sleeves and getting your hands dirty.
As you'll know, ambulance workers will be balloting today about whether to go on strike or not. Do you think that they should go on strike?
Look, really tough. I mean, obviously they're keeping emergency services going, so that's one thing. But it is tough because people are really going to feel that. But I accept that everyone has the right to withdraw their labour if they feel that they are being abused by their employer. Now, the fact is that ambulance drivers, like everyone else in our society, are suffering from a lack of money, a lack of wages, and seeing real terms cut in their income. They are the people who are actually going to be using food banks in some cases, and they are the people who are suffering. So I totally understand why they're saying, please, please listen to us. We need help. And the government has to recognise that public services have been grossly underfunded and that ambulance drivers, along with everybody else, are suffering.
It feels like quite half the country is going on strike. You've got emergency call centre workers going on strike, postal workers, rail workers. What do you think is the root cause of this, and what would be the solution out of it?
The root cause is that we've had 12 years of austerity, and we now have inflation that is over 10%, and for food inflation is 14%. So, that's the cause. It's very simple. People cannot afford the basics of life. And they're saying that loud and clear. But we need a government and we need employers that take notice.
There's a lot of problems swirling around at the moment, but if Labour were to enter office tomorrow, what do you think is the first issue that they would deal with, or should deal with?
Well, the first issue that I think a Labour government has to deal with is making sure that we fill the black hole that the Tories still have in the economy. And we can do that very easily. And we can do it without actually increasing taxes on ordinary working people. You go where the wealth is. If you look at the oil and gas producers, our basic rate of tax before the energy profits levy, the windfall tax, which is only temporary, was the lowest in the whole world. If we simply raised that to the average, the global average, we would actually see an extra 13.4 billion coming into the exchequer every single year. If you were to look at capital gains tax and say that that should be taxed at your marginal rate of tax, the rate that you pay income tax at, that would actually bring 16 billion pounds into the economy every year. And if we were to look at national insurance, not increasing the rate of national insurance for those in employment, but actually looking at income that comes not from employment, but from things like share dividends or buy-to-let landlord income. If you put national insurance on that income as well, which is only fair that they should also pay on their income, then that would bring 30 billion into the exchequer every year. Now there you have 60 billion into the exchequer without actually undermining the livelihoods of working people. You've filled the black hole and you've provided the basis for investment in the new skills, the new jobs that we need in our economy to achieve the growth that everybody talks about. You can't achieve growth simply through tax cuts. You have to have the supply side as well. That means you have to have the labour in place. You have to have the skills in place. And the problem with our economy at the moment is that we don't. So look at that, make sure that we actually set a national living wage that's at a decent level, £15 an hour, I would say. And then you'll see much more of the economy flowing back into the economy and being creative, allowing that investment and growth that we need. So there is a way through this nightmare, but it's a way that the Tories don't recognise. It's the way that Tories will never accept, because it looks at wealth and taxing wealth rather than grinding down incomes for the middle and lower income earners more and more.
Do you think that there's an argument that possibly the Tories won't accept this or don't want to implement this because it wouldn't be popular throughout the rest of the country?
Look, the Tories will continue to do what they've always done. That is to shore up the richest in our society and to do it at the expense of the poorest. That's why you've seen a 13-fold rise, 13 times rise in the income and the bonuses for the chief executives and the top 1% in our society over the past decade, at a time when ordinary working people have seen their wages reduced in real terms by more than 3%. So the gap is getting wider between rich and poor in our society, And that is the fundamental problem with the way in which we're running our economy. We are in danger of no longer being one society. And that's why when you talk about people going on strike, whether they're the ambulance workers or the train drivers or they're the nurses, all of these people are trying to get that message across, that we have to be one society. We have to care for each other. And unfortunately, this Conservative government for the past 12 years has not listened to that message.
Not hopeful that Rishi will sort it out then?
Look, I don't know who will take over in a few hours as the Prime Minister, but I know what the Tory party is like, and I know what their policies have done to this country. And whoever is our Prime Minister, both of the remaining candidates were there in Cabinet doing it. So they can't disown what's happened, they can't disown their policies, they have to accept that they are responsible for the mess that the country is now in.